fun begins.
How's it going?
Hello.
Well, greetings, young Jedi. Hello there.
What's up, everyone? Hybrid Toy Reviews here, and welcome back to another episode of Black Series of Yesteryear, the retrospective series where we talk about Black Series waves from, well, yesteryear. Last week, we kicked off the series where we talk about the red and black packaging from the Force Awakens era, and we are getting into the second wave of Force Awakens figures now. This wave came out directly before the movie dropping. So it was a little bit after that first wave. It might have been movie dropped in December. These guys kind of started showing up November of that year. There's a case of 6 figures and only 4 of them were new, so we are just going to briefly talk about the repacks. From the first wave, they repacked Finn and his Jakku outfit. Finn none of the first wave was like really sitting on pegs yet, but Finn getting a pretty immediate repack didn't help. Finn became pretty available at that point. Not knocking it, with him being a main character heavily featured in the trailer for the movie. I think he is a character that should have been readily available, but I think this should have been like the one repack, and if memory serves, there were more. So repacking him once, not a bad call. And then the other repack is the First Order Stormtrooper, which, while in last week I mentioned, is incredibly dated and wasn't even very good when it first came out. By virtue of it being a Stormtrooper, even if not a very good one, I think repacking this in any of the waves is a good choice. This is the type of character that needs to just be available, so repacking him in the second wave makes a ton of sense. So now we're going to get into the next 4 characters that make up the numerical lineup. We're going to start with figure number 6. This one had everyone uber excited. Captain Phasma. Captain Phasma was impossible to find. The rest of this wave, on pegs at Walmarts everywhere. Captain Phasma picked off the shelf the second the cases would hit. I never actually found her at retail, not for years after this movie came out. I ended up having to overpay and snag her an Evil Bay. I think I spent like $30 for her, so whatever. It wasn't the worst, but I needed Captain Phasma. I still like the character. I think she's alright. I mean, she's a evil witch, and that's fine. You know, that's just what she does. This figure is in a little bit of a flat silver. I know people want VAC metal. Hasbro has said it's impossible, so quit asking for VAC metal. She is in a nice flat silver. She is very similar to the First Order Stormtrooper, but no reuse parts as far as I can tell. She is definitely scaled up because the lady's like 17 feet tall. But she is definitely tall. They scaled her correctly. She comes with her unique, like, pearl gold colored blaster. It's very, very cool. And one thing that frustrated me with this figure, truthfully, is the big, heavy rubber cape. I really wish she'd have gotten a soft goods version. I know a Disney Store exclusive of Battle Damage came out for The Last Jedi that did come with a soft goods cape. I bought 2 of that so I could then put the soft goods cape on this Phasma that I overpaid for on eBay. But it is what it is. Similarly to the First Order Stormtrooper, there were some frustrations in her articulation, primarily in the elbows. Not as bad as the First Order Stormtrooper, but it was there, so it needs to be mentioned. There are modifications to both the Trooper and Phasma where you can like trim away some of the extra plastic in there to give it more range. It's something I did on everyone that I'd bought, but we shouldn't have to do that kind of thing. So, I'm going to just say it. But Phasma, very visually interesting, also has the same thing going on where she can peg her blaster onto her right hip, like the First Order Stormtroopers can do, or right thigh, I mean. But very, very cool figure, very hard to get at the time, and yeah, I never found her at retail. Then, going on to figure number 7, we have the on-film very handsome Oscar Isaac, Poe Dameron in his X-Wing pilot gear. Now, this Poe Dameron figure is rough. So from the neck down, it's actually a pretty acceptable First Order pilot figure, but the Poe Dameron likeness is bad. And something interesting is I've actually seen where people have taken this head sculpt and repainted it, and it's actually a pretty darn good Oscar Isaac likeness in terms of the actual sculpt they made. The problem is just the deco. They just went very heavy on the paint on it. It's very thick. It's very caked on. and it's just a rough likeness. But thankfully, he has a helmet that covers his cheeks and a visor that covers his eyes, so you can really hide a lot of the ugly by just putting the helmet on. So I've been okay with that solution. As far as the articulation goes, he's got some clunkiness going on in places, just by virtue of being a 2015 figure with double pinned knees and no butterfly joints, but he does articulate fairly well for figures of the era. And something very interesting he does, Poe quite often is seen just lounging around in his orange jumpsuit with his gloves taken off. So in the box, he's got his black gloves on, but he also comes with swappable hands that then have because the gloves cover the end of the sleeve, so the hands actually swap in the middle of the forearm. And that's interesting. It was definitely a workaround to keep the proportions ballpark right. This figure ultimately, it kind of truly in the end still feels a little bit like a dud. I'd really like to see Hasbro head to toe redo this one. Phasma 2, I don't know if I said that. But it's a product of its time, But at the time, people weren't impressed. He peg warmed rather hard, so that's unfortunate. But we needed a Poe Dameron, and I was just happy to have this when the movie came out. But yeah, all these years later, I do think it's time for Hasbro to consider taking a fresh look at our always handsome Oscar Isaac characters here. Moving on to figure number 8, we have the Guavian Enforcer, and this guy is actually pretty cool. So we see these guys early on in The Force Awakens, in the second act, I believe we're in at that point. So this is after Finn and Rey have escaped Jakku on the Millennium Falcon, but Han Solo catches them in a tractor beam on his freighter that he's using, and they're getting ready to figure out what to do next. And then everyone that Han Solo owes money to boards them in opposing gangs. When have I ever not paid you? Tell that to Kanji Club. And so the Guavian Death Gang are just mercenaries that are hanging out with the one guy that was, threatening Han. They were, hired help. And there's a couple of them wearing, the red jumpsuit with the black panels on it. The helmet's interesting, how it's kind of got like a ring visor on the front. It's very atypical, but that's just cool. And they really don't do much in the movie. But it's one of those things where it's like these guys are a little bit of a background alien. They're a little bit irrelevant ultimately, but they're a cool design. And for the people out there that claim to love, your background aliens, your no-name background guys, like these guys were pretty cool when it comes to that type of thing. I think everyone should probably pick one of these up. There were things about it, again, like any of these, very much a 2015 figure. Double pin knees, no butterfly joints. But these guys still articulate pretty nice for anything you'd want them to do. He comes with 2 blasters, and that's just a really cool, extra accessory. You can have them, one this way, one that way. You can have them dual wielding, whatever floats your boat. But he's a really cool figure. They did a lot of really neat things. He has a nice wash to him. I mean, he's just a very well done figure for such an insignificant character. And then moving on to spot number 9, you want to talk about insignificant characters. How about Constable Zuvio? So, Constable Zuvio is a character that I guess was supposed to be seen on the outpost on Jakku, and all of his scenes ended up being cut from the final cut of the movie, but Hasbro made him. They made him in 375 and Black Series. If memory serves, I think there might have been a Lego minifigure and a Funko Pop. Don't hold me to that. But this was obviously a character that Lucasfilm was just putting in the packet. There was a packet that went around all the companies saying, hey, this guy's a background alien in this movie if you're interested. And then he got cut probably last second. But Hasbro still did a pretty good action figure of the guy, I gotta say. He's a little bit of a short king, but that's okay. He's got a really cool bowl hat. He's got a ugly alien face with some weird eyes peeking out of those facial wraps going on. He's wearing a poncho with some little shoulder pads. He's got some armor plates on the arms. He's got a backpack. He's got a weird manufactured spiky spear thing going on. This guy is hard to look at in all the cool Star Wars ways. So yeah, Constable Zuvio didn't make the cut. Poor guy, but he's still kind of a cool action figure in his own way. Zuvio peg warmed super hard too. Like you could go to any Walmart and find like several Zuvios. I ended up picking one up somewhere along the way, really cheap. And it's just one of those things where it's like he's in the collection as a novelty. One day, someone in a future generation is going to point at my shelf and be like, "Who's that?" And I get to tell them of the story of the character that never was. But just a interesting design. They did a good action figure of him. And he's obviously something that's never going to get revisited, in action figure form, unless they decide to make him a character in some future media. But yeah, Constable Zuvio, interesting action figure and an interesting one to conclude this episode of Black Series of Yesteryear on. So, what do you think? Were you around for any of these figures coming out? This was an interesting time to be a collector. These were the 2 waves that were available before the movie came out. The 3rd wave, which we'll be talking about in the next episode, came out shortly after. I believe they were showing up in January. And the movie had a late December release. So we had 10 unique figures available before the movie dropped, which is a awesome amount. And they covered the majority of the bases at this point. So I really do like what we got here. I think this is a good assortment. And yeah, just some very fun designs going on here, And the execution fell flat on a few of them, but that's just the era at that point. So anyway, let's talk figures in the comments below. I look forward to catching up with you next week on the next Black Series of Yesteryear. May the Force be with each and every one of you, and I hope you all continue to have a great day. Bye.